You know that sound when a $300,000 mistake rolls over a 100-year-old gravel driveway? It's a specific kind of crunch. It sounds like arrogance meeting geology, and usually, the geology wins. I was on my knees in the dirt, elbow deep in the prize-winning hybrid teas that Arthur, God rest his complicated soul, had spent 40 years cultivating. The Virginia humidity was already sitting on my shoulders like a wet wool blanket, the kind of heat that makes the air shimmer above the asphalt. I had my grandniece's playlist humming in one earbud and the low growl of the estate's industrial mower buzzing in the distance. My hands were stained green and brown, my nails were shot to hell, and I was wearing a sun hat that had seen 3 presidencies. To the untrained eye, I looked like the help. To the specifically trained eye of Miles Whitmore Roman IV, I probably looked like a smear on the landscape of his new kingdom. Didn't pull up to the front entrance of the manor. No, that would imply he had respect for the architecture. He drove his Porsche 911 GT3, chalk gray, because of course it was, right onto the manicured circular lawn, the tires chewing up the zoysia grass I had spent 6 weeks rehabilitating after a fungal bloom. I didn't stand up immediately. I just stopped pruning. The engine cut, and the silence that followed was heavy. The door opened. Out stepped the prodigal son. He was wearing a linen suit that cost more than my first car, loafers with no socks, and an expression that suggested the air in Virginia wasn't quite filtered enough for his lungs. He looked at the house, then at the fountain, and finally he looked down at me. "Hey," he barked. He snapped his fingers. Actually snapped them. Like I was a golden retriever with a learning disability. "You, where's the valet?" I stood up then, wiping my hands on my canvas apron. I took my time. In my line of work, which isn't really gardening, though I do enjoy the violence of pruning, you learn that silence makes nervous people talk and arrogant people shout. "We don't have a valet, Mr. Whitmore," I said, my voice flat. "The staff parks around the back, guests park on the gravel. You're currently parked on the irrigation system." He laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "I'm not a guest, lady. I'm the owner." "Who are you? The weed lady?" "I'm Margaret," I said. "Great, Margaret. Grab my bags. The trunk is in the front. Try not to scratch the paint with those." He gestured vaguely at my hands, claws. "By the way, if you enjoy stories about arrogant heirs getting legally dismantled by the people they mistreat, maybe hit subscribe or drop a like. It helps the team keep the lights on while we dig up more dirt." Anyway, back to the Porsche. I looked at the car. I looked at him. I could have told him right then. I could have wiped the dirt off my hand, extended it, and said, "Actually, Miles, I'm the co-trustee of the Whitmore Family Legacy Trust, the executor of your grandfather's will, and the person who currently holds the voting proxy for the board that decides if you get your allowance." But I didn't. Arthur Whitmore, the old man who built this place from a tobacco farm into a diversified real estate empire, given me one piece of advice before the cancer took him apart piece by piece. "Margaret," he'd wheezed, grabbing my wrist with a hand that felt like dry parchment. "Let them hang themselves. The rope is cheaper than the lawyer." So I played the part. I walked over to the Porsche. I popped the frantic, pretentious little trunk, frunk, I think the kids call it. I hauled out 2 Louis Vuitton duffels that weighed less than a bag of fertilizer. Heavy lifting for an old broad, Miles muttered, tapping away on his phone. "Make sure you take them to the master suite and tell, whatever the butler's name is, that I want a scotch, neat, no ice. And if I see a single dandelion on this lawn tomorrow, you're out." He walked up the steps, not even looking back, the grand oak doors swallowing him whole. I stood there for a moment, the heat radiating off the car engine warming my legs. I looked at the ruts his tires had made in the turf. Deep, ugly scars in the perfect green velvet. "Dandelions," I whispered to myself, chuckling. He was worried about weeds. He didn't realize he was standing in a jungle, and he had just insulted the tiger. I carried his bags to the porch and left them there. Then I walked around the side of the house, past the rose garden, past the solarium, and into the small, detached stone cottage that served as the estate management office. It was cool inside, smelling of old paper and lemon polish. I sat down at my desk, a massive mahogany piece that Arthur had left me specifically, and unlocked the bottom drawer. I pulled out a thick, leather-bound binder. The spine was cracked, the pages yellowed at the edges. The Whitmore Family Trust, Governance and Behavioral Bylaws, amended 2019. I opened it to page 14. I didn't need to read it, I had memorized it, but I liked looking at the words. They looked like weapons. Clause 4, Section B, the treatment of legacy staff. I picked up my pen, a heavy Mont Blanc that contrasted sharply with my dirt-stained fingers, and opened my logbook. Date, June 14th. Time, 2:15 p.m. Incident, Air Miles Whitmore Roman 4 arrived. Unauthorized vehicle parked on sensitive landscaping, Zone B, irrigation grid. Verbal disparagement of trustee, acting in capacity of groundskeeper, demanded menial labor outside of job description. I closed the book. Miles thought he had come home to claim a kingdom. He didn't know that the kingdom had an immune system and he was the virus. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the main house kitchen. "Mrs. Higgins," I said when the cook answered. "Margaret, he's here," she whispered. "He's already complaining about the smell of the pot roast. He wants sushi in rural Virginia. In June. Give him whatever he wants," Betty said soothingly. "Let him feel like a king. Just write it down, every request, every insult, every time he sends a plate back." "Why?" she asked. "Because," I said, leaning back in my chair and watching the security feed on my monitor where Miles was currently kicking a muddy boot scraper. "We're building a case file. And I need you to be the best witness in the world." I hung up. I looked at my dirty hands. "Weed lady," I said to the empty room. I reached for the hand sanitizer. It was going to be a long summer, but the harvest was going to be spectacular. The first week of Miles's reign was less like a transition of power and more like a toddler finding a handgun. It started with the contractors. I use quotes because the van that rolled up on Tuesday didn't have a company logo, just a magnetic sticker that said Vibe Shift Interiors. 3 guys hopped out wearing skinny jeans and beanies, despite it being 92 degrees with 90% humidity. They looked like they brewed their own kombucha in a bathtub. I was trimming the boxwoods near the east wing when Miles marched out, flanked by the lead designer. "So, the wood paneling in the library," Miles was saying, waving a hand as if swatting away a fly. "It's too, Scooby-Doo, it's depressing. I want to rip it all out. Paint it white. Or maybe that distressed gray laminate. Open the space up. Make it breathable." I froze. My shears hovered over a branch. The library paneling was American chestnut. It was extinct. That wood was literally irreplaceable. It had been installed by his great-grandfather in 1928. It was worth more than Miles's entire personality. "And the books," Miles continued. "Who reads anymore? Let's turn the shelves into a sneaker display. I have a collection of Jordans that need a home." The designer nodded enthusiastically. "Totally. Can do floating glass shelves. LED backlighting. Very hype-beast chic." I felt a physical pain in my chest, a tightening right behind my sternum. It wasn't a heart attack. It was the ghost of Arthur Whitmore trying to possess my body to strangle his grandson. I didn't intervene, not yet. Intervention would show my hand. Instead, I waited until they went inside, and then I walked calmly to my cottage, pulled out the historical preservation rider attached to the trust deed. Subsection C. The maintenance of the primary residence's historical integrity. Any structural alteration to the library, solarium, or master study requires a unanimous vote by the Heritage Committee. Guess who the Heritage Committee was? Me. And a 90-year-old historian named Oblivious Dr. Aris, who did whatever I told him to do because I brought him bourbon balls every Christmas. I called the estate lawyer's office. "Jim," I said when the paralegal put me through, "he's trying to paint the chestnut paneling." There was a silence on the other end, then a sigh. "Margaret, please tell me you're joking. He wants to put sneakers on the shelves, Jim, Jordans, with leads." "I'll draft the cease and desist," Jim said, his voice sounding tired. "But we need more than bad taste to trigger the removal clause. Being a Philistine isn't technically a breach of fiduciary duty, fortunately." "Give me time," I said. "He's just warming up." And he was. By Thursday, he had fired the butler, Mr. Henderson. Henderson had been with the family for 30 years. He knew where the bodies were buried, metaphorically, and he knew how to remove a red wine stain from a white silk divan in under 3 minutes. Miles fired him because Henderson didn't know how to make a proper espresso martini. He used Kahlua, Margaret. Miles complained to me later as he watched me weeding the petunias. He seemed to think of me as a captive audience, a peasant he could vent to. "Can you believe that? Kahlua, it's 2024. We use artisanal coffee liqueur." "A tragedy," I said, ripping a dandelion out by the root. "Mr. Henderson has 3 children in college." "Well, maybe they can learn to make drinks," Miles scoffed. "I'm bringing in my own guy. Plays techno while he works." Good energy. I went back to my logbook. Date, June 18th. Incident, wrongful termination of key staff Henderson without cause. Violation of Employment Stability Agreement, Clause 8. Replacement hire unvetted by security protocols. Every day, the file grew thicker. He insulted the chef, telling Mrs. Higgins that her beef Wellington was boomer food and demanding a raw vegan menu, only to order Domino's an hour later when he got hungry. Threw a pool party on Friday night where his friends, a gaggle of influencers who looked like they were allergic to manual labor, threw glass bottles into the infinity pool. I spent Saturday morning fishing shards of Grey Goose bottles out of the filter. "Hey, gardener," Miles yelled from the balcony, holding a mimosa. "Pool looks a little cloudy. Shock it again." I looked up at him. The sun was behind him, turning him into a silhouette of entitlement. "Need to order more chemicals, Mr. Whitmore," I called back. "The budget is tight this month." "Budget?" He laughed. "I'm a Whitmore. The budget is whatever I say it is. Just buy it. Put it on the black card." I smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile that nobody saw because of my hat. The black card, I repeated to myself. He didn't know. He hadn't checked. The black card he was carrying around was linked to the discretionary operations account. And per the trust guidelines, that account had a spending cap that triggered an automatic audit if exceeded by more than 20% in a single quarter. He was currently at 18%. "Yes, sir," I said. "I'll get right on that." I went back to the office and ordered the chemicals. Then I ordered the top-tier imported fertilizer. Then I ordered the new uniforms he wanted for the staff he hadn't fired yet. I pushed the account to 19.5%. I was baiting a trap with luxury. He was eating it up with a spoon. That evening, I sat on my porch, drinking a glass of iced tea, unsweetened because I'm sweet enough, and watched the lights of the manor house blazing. Every light in the house was on. He was burning electricity like he was trying to signal aliens. I opened the trust document again. Clause 12, Fiscal Responsibility and Resource Management. The beneficiary must demonstrate prudent stewardship of estate resources. I took a sip of tea. "Prudent," I whispered. A crash echoed from the main house, the sound of something expensive breaking. I didn't even flinch. I just checked my watch. 8:42 p.m. I noted it in the log. To understand why I wasn't panicking, you have to understand Arthur Whitmore. Arthur wasn't just rich. Rich is owning a Mercedes. Arthur was wealthy. Wealth is owning the dealership, the land the dealership sits on, and the senator who zones the land. Arthur was also paranoid. He had seen what money did to people. He watched his own children turn into vultures, picking at his pockets before he was even cold. 10 years ago, I wasn't just the gardener. I was the estate manager, but my title was buried under layers of corporate obscurity to keep the family from sniffing around. I caught Arthur's nephew, Miles's uncle, a slimeball named Rick, funneling maintenance funds into a shell company in the Caymans. Rick thought he was clever. He thought listing hydraulic lift repair, $45,000 was safe because who checks the invoices for tractor parts? I did. I walked into Arthur's study, placed the invoices on his desk, and laid out the paper trail. I didn't ask for a raise. I didn't ask for a reward. I just said, "Mr. Whitmore, your nephew is stealing from the land. The land doesn't like thieves." Arthur looked at the papers, then at me. He didn't yell, just nodded. Rick was gone by sunset. Cut out of the will, barred from the property. 2 weeks later, Arthur called me in. His lawyer, Jim, was there. "Margaret," Arthur said, pouring 2 fingers of scotch, "I'm dying, not today, but soon enough. And when I go, the sharks will come. My grandson, Miles, he has his mother's taste for spending and his father's lack of spine." He slid a document across the desk. "I'm making you co-trustee," he said. I choked on my own spit. "Sir, the family will eat me alive. They see me as the help." "Exactly," Arthur smiled, and it was a wolf's smile. "They'll never see you coming. You know the land, you know the accounts, you know the truth of this place. I'm putting in safeguards, dead man's clauses, but they need a finger on the trigger, someone who isn't afraid to pull it." He pointed at Clause 14C, line 12, the Behavioral Governance Clause. "If the heir proves unworthy," Arthur whispered, "if he treats this legacy like a piggy bank or a brothel, you shut him down, you cut the cord. Can you do that, Margaret? Can you be the executioner?" I looked at the old man. I looked at the estate outside the window, the rolling hills, the oaks that had stood since the Civil War. "Yes, sir," I said. Flash forward to the present. Saturday night. The housewarming party was in full swing. Miles had invited 50 of his closest friends, people he had met in clubs in Miami, people whose names ended in I or O and who wore sunglasses at night. The bass was thumping so hard I could feel it in the floorboards of my cottage 300 yards away. I put on my boots. I wasn't going to join the party. I was going to document the crime scene. I walked the perimeter. The lawn was littered with cigarette butts. Someone had parked a G-Wagon on the croquet court. The real horror was waiting in the solarium. The solarium housed the Vittoria, a marble statue commissioned by Arthur's father in Italy in 1950. It was a breathtaking piece, a woman gazing toward the horizon, representing the family's future. Miles was standing on the plinth next to the statue. He was holding a bottle of champagne. He was drunk. "Look at this old thing," he shouted to the crowd. "Creepy, right? She looks like she's judging me. Smash it," someone yelled. "I'm gonna give her a makeover." Miles laughed. He pulled a black Sharpie from his pocket. "I stepped out of the shadows, Mr. Whitmore." My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise. He spun around, nearly slipping. "Whoa, the weed lady, what are you doing, creeping around? You trying to steal booze?" "Get down from the statue, Miles," I said. I dropped the Mr. Whitmore. "We were past that. Don't tell me what to do," he sneered. "I own this rock, I own you." He turned back to the statue and drew a mustache on the marble face. A thick, jagged black line across the pristine white stone. The crowd cheered. "There," Miles yelled. "Now she's modern." I felt a coldness settle in my stomach. It was the same feeling I had when I found Japanese beetles on the roses. Pure, clinical detachment. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call the police. I didn't call security. I snapped a photo. High resolution. Flash on. Miles blinked in the sudden light. "Hey, no paparazzi. Just updating the inventory," I said calmly. I turned and walked away. As I walked back into the dark, I dialed the lawyer's private number. It was 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday. "Margaret," Jim answered on the second ring. He sounded awake. He defaced the Vittoria, I said. "Marker, permanent. In front of witnesses. Is it on camera? And I have stills." "Okay," Jim said. "That's vandalism of trust assets. That triggers Section 9. But we need the big one, Margaret. We need the public termination." "I know," I said. "I'm going to give him the opportunity tomorrow." "Be careful," Jim warned. "I'm not the one in danger, Jim," I said. "I'm just the gardener." I hung up. The bass thumped on. But to me, it sounded like a funeral march. Sunday morning dawned bright and cruel. The kind of morning that punishes a hangover with blinding sunlight and the screaming of cicadas. I was ready. I had organized the landscaping crew, 3 guys, loyal to me, not the paycheck, to be working on the main terrace. We were doing high-visibility work, hedge trimming, leaf blowing, the loud stuff. I knew Miles had guests staying over, specifically a couple of angel investors he was trying to charm into funding his Tech for Toddlers app idea, or whatever scam he was running this week. At 10:00 a.m., Miles stumbled onto the terrace. He was wearing sunglasses and a silk robe that looked ridiculous. His guests, a man and a woman in business casual, looked less hungover and more judgmental. They were scanning the grounds, likely assessing the collateral for whatever loan Miles was begging for. I was right below the balcony, shaping the hydrangeas. I had instructed the crew to turn off the blowers the second he appeared, so the silence would be sudden and spotlight focusing. "And this," Miles was saying, his voice raspy, "is the estate, all mine, 300 acres. We're thinking of putting a helipad over there by the tree place." The arboretum, I corrected without looking up. My voice carried perfectly in the quiet morning air. Miles stiffened. The guests looked down at me. "Excuse me," Miles snapped. "It's called the Arboretum, Mr. Whitmore," I said, snipping a dead head off a bloom. "And you can't put a helipad there. The ground is protected wetlands. Federal designation." Female investor raised an eyebrow. "Protected wetlands?" "Miles, you said the zoning was clear." Miles's face flushed a blotchy red. He gripped the stone railing. "It is clear. Don't listen to her. She's just the help." He leaned over the balcony. "Hey, Margaret, shut up and cut the grass." "The grass is cut, sir," I said calmly. "I'm pruning the hydrangeas. If I don't do it now, they won't bloom in August." "I don't care about August." Miles screamed. His voice cracked. The alcohol and the embarrassment were creating a toxic cocktail in his brain. "I care about you knowing your place. You're embarrassing me." "I'm stating facts, sir," I said. I stood up and looked him in the eye. I took off my sun hat. I let him see the gray in my hair and the steel in my eyes. "Perhaps if you read the estate survey, you'd know about the wetlands." That was it. The bait was taken. The trap snapped shut. Miles lost it. He completely unraveled, through his mimosa glass. It shattered on the flagstones 3 feet from my boot. "You insolent old hag," he shrieked. "You think you can talk back to me? In my house, in front of my guests?" The investors were taking a step back, looking uncomfortable. The male investor was actually checking his watch. "I am the Whitmore. I am the lord of this manor." He actually said that. Lord of the manor, you can't make this stuff up. You are fired, he bellowed. The words echoed off the valley walls. Hear me? Fired, get your shit, get off my property. Right now, you and your little crew get out. The world seemed to stop. The birds stopped singing. The crew looked at me terrified. I didn't flinch. I didn't beg, I looked at the guests. Did you hear that? I asked them politely. The man said. He terminated my employment, I said, effective immediately, for cause of insubordination, damn right. Miles yelled, fired, terminated, go. Understood, I said, reached into my apron pocket. I didn't pull out a trowel. I pulled out my phone. I dialed Jim. I put it on speaker, but I held it close. It's done, I said. Did he use the words? Jim asked. He yelled, you are fired and terminated in front of 2 witnesses and the landscaping crew, I said. And you have not been authorized for termination by the board. No, sir. Okay, Jim said. I could hear the smile in his voice. Triggering the inheritance clause 14C. Freezing assets in 3, 2, 1. I hung up. I looked up at the balcony. Miles was panting, looking triumphant. He thought he had won. He thought he had just exerted dominance. Then his phone buzzed. Then the female investor's phone buzzed. Probably a news alert, no, likely a notification from a compliance check. Bad vibes travel fast in finance. Miles looked at his phone. His face went from red to a color I like to call audit ash. What the? He muttered. Why is my card declined? He looked down at me. I hadn't moved. I told you to leave. He screamed, but there was fear in it now. I can't, Miles, I said. I have work to do, and technically. I put my hat back on. You're trespassing. It took exactly 45 minutes for Jim to arrive. In that time, Miles had tried to call the police to have me removed, but the dispatcher, who happens to be my cousin's wife, Sarah, just kept asking him to please hold while she verified the jurisdiction. Miles was pacing in the grand foyer, the investors having awkwardly Ubered away 10 minutes prior. He was frantically tapping his phone, which I assumed was now a very expensive paperweight. When the black Lincoln town car crunched up the driveway, Miles let out a sigh of relief. He thought it was backup. He thought it was his dad or some fix-it guy. He didn't expect Jim. Jim is 6'4", wears suits that look like they were cut from funeral curtains and has the bedside manner of a tombstone. He walked up the steps, briefcase in hand. I was standing by the door, still in my muddy boots. Miles glared at me. Finally, Miles shouted at Jim, "Are you the firm's rep? Good. This woman refuses to leave. She's trespassing. I want her arrested. And I want to know why my accounts are frozen. Is it a glitch?" Jim didn't answer immediately. He walked past Miles, placed his briefcase on the antique entry table, carefully avoiding the vase, and clicked the latches open. Snap, snap, Mr. Whitmore, Jim said, his voice a deep baritone that seemed to suck the air out of the room. "I am James Sterling, legal counsel for the Whitmore Legacy Trust." "Yeah, I know who you are," Miles snapped. "You work for me." "No, sir," Jim said, pulling out a document on thick, cream-colored paper. "I work for the trust. You are a beneficiary of the trust. There's a significant difference. Whatever, fix my cards and fire her." Miles pointed a shaking finger at me. Jim turned to me. "Margaret, would you confirm the events of this morning? Mr. Whitmore terminated my employment publicly at 10:12 a.m., I recited. He cited insubordination. He refused to consult the board. Lies. Miles yelled. "I don't need a board to fire a gardener." Jim handed the paper to Miles. "Actually, you do," Jim said. Miles snatched the paper. "What is this legalese crap? Read clause 14C, paragraph 2, Jim said calmly. It was added in 2019. Any beneficiary who terminates a steward of record, defined as a staff member with more than 15 years of tenure or trustee status, without unanimous authorization from the governance board, shall act in breach of the good stewardship covenant." Miles's eyes scanned the page. His lips moved as he read. Looked like a child trying to read quantum physics. "So what?" Miles scoffed. "I breached a covenant. Send me a fine. I'll pay it when you unlock my money." "You didn't read the penalty, Miles," I said from the corner. Jim continued, reciting from memory. "The penalty for such a breach is the immediate suspension of all discretionary access. The beneficiary's status is downgraded to conditional resident. All financial accounts are frozen pending a full tribunal review. Control of the estate reverts to the co-trustee." Miles looked up. He looked at Jim. Then he looked at me. "Co-trustee?" he whispered. "Surprise," I said dryly. "You?" Miles laughed, but it sounded like a sob. "The weed lady, you're the trustee? I'm the person who decides if you get to eat this month, Miles," I said. "And right now I'm not feeling very generous." Miles frantically dialed his father. He put it on speaker. Dad, pick up. They're trying to steal the house." Phone rang and rang. "Then you have reached the voicemail of Miles Whitmore Roman 3. If this is Miles Roman 4, son, the lawyers called me. You're on your own. I warned you about Margaret. Don't ask for money." Click. Miles dropped the phone. It hit the marble floor with a crack. My dad. He knew. Everyone knew Miles, Jim said, closing his briefcase. "Everyone except you, because you never bothered to ask who actually ran this place." Jim turned to me. "Trusty, do you have instructions for the security team?" I looked at Miles. He looked small. The arrogance was evaporating, leaving just a scared, spoiled boy in a silk robe. "No security yet," I said. "Let him simmer." "But Jim, cut the Wi-Fi." "Done," Jim said. Miles looked at the router blinking in the corner. "You can't do that." "How will I stream?" "Read a book, Miles," I said, turning to the door. "But not in the library. I hear the lighting is bad for sneakers." Next 24 hours were a masterclass in impotence. Miles tried to leave, to drive into town and, I don't know, rage eat sushi. But when he got to the Porsche, it wouldn't start. Why? Because the Porsche was leased by the estate LLC. And as the trustee, I had reported it as at risk of unauthorized use via the tracking app. The engine was remotely disabled. I watched from the kitchen window as he kicked the tires. He looked like a toddler denied a juice box. The juice box had 500 horsepower. He stormed back into the house and tried to order an Uber. But with his personal cards maxed out and the estate cards frozen, his app just kept pinging payment method invalid. He was trapped. In a mansion. With a fully stocked wine cellar, he couldn't open digital keypad, code changed at 11 o'clock a.m., and a pantry full of boomer food he didn't know how to cook. At 2 o'clock p.m., the board convened. Didn't meet in the grand dining room. We met in the conference room of Jim's law firm in town. I drove my beat-up Ford. Miles had to be shuttled in by the estate's security guard, Frank, in the back of the patrol jeep. Miles walked in looking disheveled. He hadn't shaved. He was wearing a tracksuit. The board sat around the mahogany table. There was Jim, legal. There was cousin Sarah, the one from the 911 dispatch, representing family interests. There was Judge Holloway, retired, representing community standards. And there was me. "This is a kangaroo court," Miles shouted as he sat down. "I want a lawyer." "You can hire one," Judge Holloway said, peering over his spectacles. "With what funds, I'm not sure. But you're welcome to try." "We are here to vote on the suspension of privileges," Jim announced. Motion brought by co-trustee Margaret regarding the events of June 14th through 19th. She provoked me. Miles pointed at me. She was disrespectful. "She didn't tell me who she was. Did you ask?" I said quietly. "I shouldn't have to ask." Miles slammed his hand on the table. "I'm the heir, you are a steward," I corrected him. "Just like me, just like Arthur was. You don't own the land, Miles, you serve it, and you have failed." I slid a folder across the table. Item A, the invoices for the Vibe Shift renovations. Unauthorized structural changes. Item B, the firing of Mr. Henderson, resulting in a potential wrongful termination lawsuit. Item C, the damage to the Vittoria statue. Estimate for restoration, $15,000. Item D, the public termination of the coat rusty. Sarah flipped through the photos of the statue. She shook her head. "Grandpa loved that statue, Miles. You drew a mustache on it? Really? It was irony." Miles pleaded. "It was art. It was vandalism," Judge Holloway grunted. "I call for vote," Jim said. "Suspend privileges," Sarah said. "Suspend," the judge said. "Suspend," Jim said. They looked at me. I looked at Miles. He had sweat on his upper lip. He looked like he was about to cry. "Miles," I said, "if you had just said thank you when I carried your bags, if you had just learned the names of the people who make your bed, we wouldn't be here. I can change," he stammered. "I'll be better. I'll garden. I'll learn the plants." "It's too late for the harvest, Miles," I said. "Suspend." The gavel didn't bang. We didn't have a gavel. Jim just stamped a document, approved. "Miles Whitmore Roman 4, Jim said. "Effective immediately, you are stripped of all financial authority. You are permitted to reside in the guest cottage, the guest cottage." Miles gasped. That's a shed. "It's for the pool boy, pending a probationary period of 6 months," Jim finished. "If you demonstrate growth, we may review. If not, total disinheritance. You can't do this." Miles screamed. "We just did," I said. "Frank will drive you back. Don't go into the main house. Your biometric access has been revoked." Miles stood there, shaking. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You planned this," he hissed. "You set me up." "I didn't plant the seeds, Miles," I said, gathering my files. "I just watered them." Tuesday was assessment day. Miles was holed up in the guest cottage. I saw him peering through the blinds like a fugitive. The guest cottage is actually quite nice. 2 bedrooms, a kitchenette. But to Miles, it was basically solitary confinement at Alcatraz. I walked the main house with Mr. Sterling, Jim, and a forensic appraiser named Clark. Clark was a man of few words and many calculators. We started in the library. The paneling, I pointed out. Miles hadn't managed to paint it yet, but the designers had sanded down a patch to test the grain. Clark ran a finger over the scarred wood. American chestnut, old growth. Restoration will require sourcing reclaimed lumber from the 1920s. Expensive, very difficult. He tapped on his iPad. Click, click, click. Estimated damage, $12,000. We moved to the kitchen. The industrial wolf range, a masterpiece of culinary engineering, was covered in burnt sugar and what looked like melted plastic. Miles had tried to flambe something. Burner replacement. Hood cleaning. Smoke damage to the ceiling tiles, Clark muttered. Click, 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 $4,500. Then the solarium, the Vittoria. The Sharpie had soaked into the porous marble. We can laser it, Clark said, grimacing. But it might leave a shadow. We'll need a specialist from DC. Click, click, click. $18,000. Tallied it up. In 1 week, Miles had caused roughly $50,000 in physical damages. That didn't include the severance pay for the butler or the legal fees. He's going to sue, you know, Jim said as we walked out onto the veranda. He's in that cottage right now Googling elder abuse and hostile work environment. Let him, I said. He signed the arbitration agreement when he accepted the keys. He says he didn't sign it, Jim noted. Claims you forged his signature on the arrival documents. I stopped. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a USB drive. Remember when he arrived? I asked. And I was working on the irrigation? Yes. I wear a body cam, I said, for training purposes. It's in the employee handbook. Clause 6, safety monitoring. Jim took the USB drive. He looked at it like it was a gold bar. You have him signing the papers. I have him signing the papers, calling me a clawed beast, and admitting he didn't read them, I said. I also have footage of him drunk on the statue, and footage of him firing me, and footage of him trying to bribe the pool guy to buy him cocaine. Jim pocketed the drive. A slow, shark-like smile spread across his face. Margaret, he said, you are terrifying. I'm efficient, I said. Just then, the door to the guest cottage flew open. Miles stormed out. He was wearing the same tracksuit. I see you, he screamed across the lawn. I see you counting my money. You're thieves. I'm calling the news. I'm going to tell them you kidnapped me. I looked at Clark, the appraiser. Did you get that? I asked. Clark held up his iPad, audio recording active. Threatening behavior noted. Add it to the tab, I said. Miles ran out of steam halfway across the lawn. He stopped, realizing he had nowhere to go. The main house was locked. The cars were dead. The gate was closed. He stood there in the middle of the perfect green lawn. I'm hungry, he yelled. It was a pathetic, childish sound. There's a microwave in the cottage, Miles, I called back, and I left a can of soup on the counter. I hate soup, he wailed. I turned back to Jim. I think we're done here, I said. Prepare the eviction notice for the guest cottage. He's violating the noise ordinance. You're going to kick him off the property entirely? Jim asked. He has to hit rock bottom, Jim, I said, watching Miles kick a sprinkler head. The estate can't heal until the infection is gone. Wednesday morning was the silence after the storm. The estate was breathing again. The birds were singing. The mowers were humming in the distance, driven by the crew I had rehired with a 10% raise, and the air smelled of honeysuckle and justice. I set up a small table on the east veranda. White linen tablecloth, silver teapot, a single china cup, and a plate of Mrs. Higgins's scones, fresh from the oven. I sat there, sipping Earl Grey, watching the sun rise over the valley. It was the seat Arthur used to sit in. I felt heavy but right. At 9:00 a.m., Miles appeared. He looked rough. The guest cottage experience hadn't agreed with him. His hair was matted, his eyes were bloodshot. He walked up the steps to the veranda, smelling of stale sweat and desperation. He stopped when he saw the table. He stared at the scones. Is that breakfast? He asked. Voice was cracked. It's my breakfast, I said, buttering a scone. Mrs. Higgins makes a lovely currant jam. He swallowed hard. The fridge in the cottage. It was empty. Just water and that one can of soup. Yes, I said, basic rations. As stipulated in the emergency housing clause. He slumped into a chair opposite me. I didn't invite him to sit, but I didn't kick him out. This is insane, Margaret, he said. He sounded tired. The fight was gone. You can't starve me. Have a trust fund, Miles, I said, the basic one. The one your mother set up. It pays out $2,000 a month. $2,000. He looked horrified. That's not even rent. It is in Ohio, I said, or maybe a nice apartment in Roanoke. But here, no. Here you need the legacy trust, and you lost that. I can fix it, he said. I'll apologize. I'll apologize to the butler. I'll apologize to the statue. Just turn the money back on. Put down my teacup. The china clinked softly against the saucer. It's not a light switch, Miles, I said. It's a contract. You broke the covenant. You proved conclusively that you care more about your ego than this family's history. I'm family, he cried. Doesn't that mean anything? Blood is biology, I said. Family is behavior. Arthur knew that. That's why he wrote the clause. Grandpa was crazy, Miles muttered. Grandpa was a genius, I said. He knew you were coming. Told me, Margaret, the boy has a hole in his soul where the work ethic should be. He gave me the shield to protect this place from you. Miles stared at me. You hate me. I don't hate you, Miles, I said honestly. I pity you. You had everything. You had a legacy handed to you on a silver platter, and you used it as an ashtray. I slid a heavy envelope across the table. It wasn't the eviction notice. It was a plane ticket. What's this? One way to New York, I said. Coach, and a check for $5,000. Starter money, from my personal account, not the trust. You're paying me to leave? I'm paying for peace and quiet, I said. The board voted to terminate your residency. You have 1 hour to vacate the guest cottage. Frank will drive you to the airport. Miles looked at the check. He looked at the ticket. He looked at the scones. Can I take a scone? He asked. It was the first honest, humble thing he had said all week. Take 2, I said. It's a long flight. He grabbed the scones, stuffing them into his pockets. He stood up. He didn't say thank you. He just turned and walked away. But his shoulders were slumped. The swagger was gone. I watched him go. Cut the grass better, I whispered to myself. I took another sip of tea. It was perfect. The walk down the driveway is long. It's a 1/4 mile of crushed white stone lined by ancient oaks that form a canopy, a tunnel of green and shadow. I stood at the gate and watched Miles walk it. He didn't get a ride from Frank in the end. He refused it. Maybe it was a last shred of dignity, or maybe he just wanted to delay the inevitable. He dragged his Louis Vuitton bags, scuffed now, stained with mud, behind him. The wheels crunched on the gravel. Crunch, 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 the sound of defeat. At the end of the driveway, a yellow taxi was waiting. Not an Uber Black, a local taxi. Crown Vic with a dented bumper. Miles stopped at the gate. He looked back at the house. It stood on the hill, magnificent, indifferent. The windows reflected the clouds. It didn't care that he was leaving. It had seen 5 generations of Whitmores come and go. It would see 5 more. He looked at me. I was holding my pruning shears. You win, he yelled from the gate. Are you happy? You're the queen of the castle now. Alone. I'm never alone, Miles, I said, though he couldn't hear me. Have the ghosts. He threw his bags into the trunk of the taxi and got in. The car drove away, disappearing around the bend. Silence rushed back in to fill the space he left. Jim pulled up in his town car a moment later. He rolled down the window. He's gone, I said. The board is asking about the succession plan, Jim said. With Miles out, the trust defaults to the secondary line. That's his cousin, Abigail, the veterinarian in Vermont. I know Abigail, I smiled. She likes dirt. She drives a Subaru. She'll do fine. And until then, I said, I'll keep the lights on. Jim nodded. You know, Margaret, Arthur told me something else before he died. Oh, he said he didn't write Clause 14C. He said you dictated it to him. I looked at the shears in my hand. I remembered that night in the study. Arthur was weak, worried his legacy would crumble. I had taken the pen from his hand. I had written the words, Good Stewardship Covenant. Arthur was a romantic, I said. He believed in blood. I believe in contracts. Jim laughed. Remind me never to cross you, Margaret. Just don't park on the Zoysia, I said. Jim drove off. I was alone at the gate. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of rain coming. Good. The hydrangeas needed it. I walked back up the driveway. I didn't go into the house. I didn't go to the master suite or the wine cellar. I went to the tool shed, put on my canvas apron. I sharpened my shears. I filled a bucket with fertilizer. There was a patch of weeds near the solarium that needed attention. The roots were deep, but I was patient. I knelt in the dirt. I dug my hands into the soil. Some people think power is a corner office or a black credit card. They're wrong. Power is deciding what grows and what gets cut. I pulled a weed, roots and all, and tossed it on the pile. Cut the grass better, I chuckled. I turned on the sprinkler. The water hissed, a lovely serpentine sound. We were all healed.
Life doesn't always hand out clean endings, but sometimes it gives you exactly what you need. Thanks for listening. Until next time.